3,000 actual local governments in New York State, and we are not at the high end of the list in terms of other states per capita for our municipal governments. The vast majority are, as you say, sewer, lighting, basically administrative districts, not actual municipal governments. I'll throw this one over to Steve Aquario. Any possibility of working together to address the prevailing wage issue, to either eliminate it entirely or to put a maximum level under which a proposal or a project wouldn't have prevailing wage applied to it? I've always said that WIX was the moat around the prevailing wage issue so that we could never get to it.
Well, in order to accomplish something, you need a partner. You need a state government to change this. This is a statute, but I think it's largely interpreted through regulation by the Labor Department. So the short answer to the question is very difficult to change that. I think what the state, one way that we might be able to encourage them to take a look at this is when and if the state looks at the cost of construction or the cost of doing business by municipality, and I wouldn't rule it out of the picture. Continuing the way the state is thinking about local governments right now and thinking that they're inefficient and there's too many of us, the next step perhaps could be to look at how are they spending their money. And one of the ways that we could show them how we're spending our money is through prevailing wages and the differences of these prevailing wages. Some areas it's not the prevailing wage, as many of you know, in your community, in your town, in your village, even in your county. It's tied to a prevailing wage, perhaps several counties over. So one of the ways we could do that is as we go through and work with the state on submitting plans and things, perhaps in our government efficiencies plans, we could show savings in public construction projects through a true prevailing wage in your community and submit it right to the state and get their attention that way.
Yeah, there's certainly through the disparities in different areas in the state, the prevailing union wage is frequently very much different than the prevailing wage in total. Given the fact that in many areas you have to travel several hours to get to the union wage to bring it into the work when it's required. I want to open this one up to the elected officials on the panel. Do existing state laws, this really brings it right down to basics, do existing state laws encourage or discourage state shared services?
Yeah, you and me.
Well, I'm not elected. I'm appointed. But let me tell you what I think. I don't think necessarily that the state law does either, per se. I think shared services are something that the local government itself has to decide to do, and that largely is the way shared services has evolved, I believe, historically, is that the town or the village or the county has an issue that they need to get addressed. The town supervisor asks their highway superintendent, or the highway superintendent asks the supervisor, and they go to the board, and the board will talk to the county guys, or they'll talk to someone else, and that's how it gets done. So I don't think there's any enabling legislation there, but I don't see anything that prohibits it. And so consequently, through the MOU process, memorandum of understanding, municipalities have traditionally solved problems, and I don't see that changing. I think that's what we do. We do it every day, and we'll continue to do it. And it may not work on every situation, and you're right, we need a back door to get out. But on those things where it makes sense, we should do it. And we do.
I want to throw this one over to at least Tim and Lynn, but they may need some help on the municipal side to answer this question in total. What's your advice for municipalities and school districts to collaborate to control spending?
As an elected official, people don't think of school board members as being elected, but there are already over 5,000 elected school board members throughout the state. I think we're just perceived as the passers of high taxes on their residents. In my experience working locally, I mean, we've had the SROs, the school resource officers, for a long time, and initially the town actually provided them at no cost to the school district, so the town was picking up the entire burden. Well, this is going back quite a few years, and as budgets tightened, you know, we started sharing the load on that. And unfortunately, we even had to cut back on one this past year, again, for budgetary reasons. So there's always been a good relationship that way. Back in 2010, when budget crises were getting serious, we applied with the town for a shared municipal services grant. It was an incentive grant to do a feasibility study on possibly looking at field maintenance, because you know, residents use both the school fields and the town fields for soccer, etc. Snow removal, everybody's involved with that. But and we had it written actually by someone who, you know, was very professional in that area, and it was still rejected. We didn't get it, and they attempted to change it, and then the funds dried up, and so we couldn't receive that grant. We also now are looking at for years the town has received our school taxes. They've sent out the tax bills, and we've worked through the town on that, and we're looking at a possible way of changing that so that we're actually taking care of that. It would save money for the town, and whether we go through BOCES or whatever, we're seeing if we can save money also, which hopefully would qualify for the governor's plan. But we have a good relationship. In fact, the other night, we did an explanation of the property tax freeze, trying to do it somewhat simplistically so that, you know, that people could understand it. And even doing it simplistically, it's tough to understand. And our town supervisor was there. I think he wanted to see how we were attempting to explain it and perhaps use some of that same information and maybe explaining it at a town board meeting. So we have had a very close relationship in attempting to do these things. Whether there's roadblocks, from the other question, state roadblocks, I'm not really sure. But I'm sure there are some walls there that kind of prevent it. But I think it's more historical than anything else, that we've operated in our own little silos. And I think that's something now we need to move on with.
Tim?
Dave, I would only add to that Mildred had made mention of the BOCES. There are 37 BOCES, Boards of Cooperative Educational Services, and some of them have become rather entrepreneurial and have developed back office business functions and have done a lot of regional collaborations and such. But first and foremost, they're educational institutions, and that cultural shift of serving towns and villages and municipalities is a big one. So it might make sense to start with an existing network like a BOCES, but it might have to be something brand new. I've watched those regional economic development councils go through their competitive bid process and be awarded these state funds, and I've wondered if that sort of thing would make sense for this kind of a work, that organizations like ours that are represented here put together a bid, a plan that would say, we would do the following if you, the state, would pay for it. And we would perhaps compete with one another to get that funding, which forces you to be creative, but forces you to be collaborative. It's a model that might be worthy of our consideration. I think the BOCES, as it stands, is a good model, but I'm not sure that it attends itself easily to different entities other than schools.
The school board members that are here today have heard me